Hello everybody, welcome into our latest live broadcast. It's Wednesday, the 5th of February, 2025. My name is CareyHolzman. Thank you guys so much for joining us today. And if you're curious, with all the computers you've seen me build here, what happens to them after they're built? I thought we'd address that today because in some cases we never see the computer again, especially if it's being shipped out of state. But for most computers, they do eventually come back to us for upgrades. It's pretty rare we see anything come back for repairs. However, if a machine is a really high-end build, if that's the kind of customer that we've got, we usually see the machine back within 4 years on average. When it comes to business clients, I usually recommend, well not usually, I always recommend my business clients upgrade their computers no more than waiting after 6 years. So if you're running a business and you bought a computer from me 5 years ago, I have a sticker I place somewhere on the computer that shows the date it was delivered, month and year. I don't need the precise day of the month. And that gives us a vague idea whenever we do maintenance or the customer calls with any concerns. How old is this machine we're working on? Should we be spending any more time working on it? The business is still in business. They probably want to keep it that way. I'm sure the computer has paid for itself many times over. Let's talk about upgrading it. For my customers, I like to use modular parts, and that's for three reasons. One is that anybody can work on the computer. It doesn't have to be me, unlike certain proprietary system integrators, whose names will go unmentioned, Dell HP. Sometimes they use parts that you have to buy from them at whatever price they decide to charge you. If something were to happen to me and I was no longer available, they could literally get anybody to work on my computers. I don't lock them in to have to work with me. I want my clients to come back because they want to, not because they have to. The second reason is that we can often reuse a lot of components, such as the case and power supply, and just replace the motherboard, CPU, RAM, and storage, because all of that, as you well know, just looking back 4 years, how much we've changed with regards to Gen 4 solid state drives, Gen 5 solid state drives, DDR5 RAM, the different chipsets and the different processors. So for that reason, in many cases, the computer case itself still works. The power supply can still work. If they have an optical drive, we can carry that over. And that saves the customer a bit of money, as well as reduces any e-waste, things of that nature. And then there's a third reason, which I was going to get to, but now that I've gone off explaining all the details of the first two reasons, I'm trying to think what the third reason was. But overall, what I like about the systems that I build for my clients is they're very easy for me to maintain. So if a client does have an issue, which is highly unlikely because we're using quality products and I want to stay in business and maintain a reputation, a good reputation, it makes it easier. First of all, less likely they're going to have a problem to begin with, because we're not building with the most expensive parts, but we're not building with the cheapest parts either. We go right down that middle. Keep emphasizing, go down the middle. We, for business clients, avoid any unnecessary expenses, from liquid cooling and RGB lighting to overclocking or XMP or DOCP. All of that stuff is nonsense in 99% of most professional businesses, and it's a potential point of support issue, which I would be expected to cover at my own expense should there be a problem, right? If I'm standing behind my product, they expect my product to work. Furthermore, most businesses don't find that look professional. It's gaudy and attention-seeking, and they want the business to be attention-seeking, not their stapler or their computer. Sometimes a business may have a reception desk and they may have some fancy stuff out in the lobby. That's an exception, and that's for pretty large clients that even have a lobby. A lot of my smaller businesses most of the businesses I work with are smaller. And those that have a lobby, it's a pretty small lobby. There's not room for like a showcase piece. Some people have an aquarium in their lobby, a saltwater aquarium. I don't have any clients that have that. But that kind of client maybe wants an RGB liquid-cooled showpiece. I don't have any. The only people that want that are home users, and home users don't nearly spend anywhere close to what a business spends. So for example, A business might need 10 computers from me every 4 to 6 years. A home user may need 1 computer from me every 10 years. So for me to stay in business, you know, I got to go where the work is. And in this case, we built this computer as a channel build, and also to provide Mara with a computer that she could work from home and play games and do the creative stuff she wanted to do. And she likes to have the best of the best. And I just thought it was a match made in heaven. I'll make this outrageous computer. I don't have to worry about selling it. And sure enough, about 4 years later, or a little over 4 years later, we've replaced it. Mara now has the Z890 ProArt, which is almost in many ways the opposite of this. Well, we do have liquid cooling. We don't have like RGB liquid cooling. And I would say the liquid cooler is far better than this one. But this one is adequate for what it has, you know, for the CPU that's on it. This is, I believe, a 10900K, and we're on the 15th gen now, so that's 4 generations since, right? 11th, 12th, 13th, 14th, 15th, 5 generations. And for somebody that's always wanting the most amount of power because they're very demanding, not because they're running benchmarks, but because they actually need it, jumping 4 years ahead can make a difference in performance. It's quite noticeable. If the upgrade were every year, every 2 years, or even every 3 years, you likely won't see much performance increase. For the amount of money you're going to spend, you'll barely see more than about 25%, 30% in peak performance difference, which for most people isn't worth the full price of all the replacement of components. You know, for us to go to 12th gen or greater would require a different motherboard because the socket and chipset are different. For us to go to the 15th gen is yet again another motherboard and different socket, so and chipset. So that's why the 4-year mark is pretty common. We get about a 10% increase in performance, whether it's Intel or AMD, year after year after year. And so if you take a computer and you upgrade it after a year, sure, the upgrade's going to be cheaper because you might still be able to use the same board. Like we could take that 10900K out, put an 11900K in there. It's a pretty cheap upgrade and almost completely indistinguishable in performance. So you do get what you pay for. But once you get to about the 40% or greater mark, so if you figure 10% a year in performance on average between generations of CPUs, after 4 years, now the end user is going to actually experience and feel that performance difference at a minimum 40%. Now, the longer you wait, if you go to 6 years, 8 years, you're definitely going to notice things are a lot faster. However, a lot of older components that you might want to carry over may no longer be compatible with the machine, so then your upgrade will cost more. At such point, you might just be better off buying a whole new computer rather than trying to upgrade. There is that point of upgrade versus replace. And when you're at an upgrade where you're nearly replacing everything, wouldn't you be better off just keeping the computer as a spare? Because if all you're going to end up reusing at the end of the day is the case, for the price of the case, you could have a second computer. So in that case, don't upgrade. In that case, replace. So if you upgrade too soon, you spend a lot of money to get very little difference from what you had. If you upgrade too late, you might as well just replace the computer for the cost difference. And if you upgrade, guess where I'm going? Right down the middle, which is between 4 and 6 years. Every 4 or 6 years, you're going to hit the sweet spot of being able to still carry over older tech, at least on this upgrade. Now in 4 to 6 years on your next one, the older stuff is going to be ancient in computer terms. So just keep all that in mind. Have reasonable expectations for your wallet and your performance. What I want to do today is rip all this out. I think we're going to keep the liquid cooler with that motherboard because that liquid cooler does not have mounting brackets for socket 1700 or 1851. So in other words, for us to reuse that liquid cooler onto a 12th, 13th, or 14th gen CPU, that socket 1700, that may require slightly different mounting mechanism. And then now we're on socket 1851, which may again require a different mounting mechanism. So for those reasons, we know that that liquid cooler is properly installed with the right parts intended to be used on a 10th gen CPU. So we might as well just keep it together. There's nothing wrong with it. When we put a new motherboard in here, we'll probably put maybe an Ultra 7, Ultra 9, I don't know. We'll put something in there, and we will put the equivalent liquid cooler that goes with that chip, and we'll try and keep it the same as far as, you know, placing the liquid cooler in the same place where the fans are exposed in RGB. It doesn't have to be Thermaltake. It might be. Part of the reason I did this was to do the most Thermaltake parts that I could. So it's a Thermaltake power supply, which is in great shape. We're not going to reuse this graphics card. Maybe we will, but the graphics card I'm not worried about. I'm going to put that on a shelf for now. My main concern is to prep this for motherboard replacement, and because it's so extreme, that will be a cooler replacement. And because this board is so extreme, it's still going to need an extreme cooler. So for all those reasons, we're going to leave the cooler attached. We're going to take the cooler off and keep them together. We'll keep the RAM, the storage all together, and then the motherboard will come out with that all attached. At that point, we just need to reinstall Windows. It is fully Windows 11 compatible. We can keep the drives in there. We had an upgraded 10 gig card in here. We're going to pull that. We won't use that anymore. The new the new Asus ProArt Z890 has a 10 gig built right into the motherboard. So this was a stopgap measure. So these will go back as spare parts. Now this is often what happens when we do upgrades for customers. And if the customer doesn't want the parts back, we may keep, if the parts are in good shape, we may keep them as either parts for future testing or to offer to a customer who's on a budget who can't quite afford what they want, just to give them an alternative with a caveat that there's no warranty, or there's 30 days warranty typically on used items. And you know, if customer wants to do that, I will. Normally, I wouldn't even allow that as an option, because if the part fails, it may look like to the customer I intentionally sold them a bad part, when all I was trying to do was help them. So that also depends on the customer and the customer's understanding of the conditions. For some customers, I may not even offer it. For some, I might just be setting myself up for a big nightmare of complaints that are unreasonable. In that case, you just tell the customer, you got to buy it new, and this is what the price is, and if you can't afford it, you can't afford it. Somebody's going to pay for it one way or another. I'm paying for it either with potential support calls, or the customer's paying for it where they're in warranty, right? So if a customer is a regular customer, I'm familiar with them, and I know they don't normally call with problems, it would be pretty rare if they did, then I can offer those kind of folks the used product if they want to keep the budget down. And I'm very confident that if they do have a problem, they've dealt with me before. They know it's not me. Somebody who I'm not familiar with, it could go either way, and it's not worth my reputation and having a customer upset just trying to save the customer some money. In that case, I'd be better off not saving that customer some money, because the money that customer's saving potentially is coming directly out of my wallet with any future business or negative reviews, which is far more cost to me, just so I'm trying to save the customer money. So again, these are things you need to consider when you're working with other people. When you build for yourself, you do whatever you want. You spend whatever you want. When you build for other people, it very much changes the dynamic and the reasons why we do certain things. And we often have borders that we have to stay within, right? The client's going to say, I need this, I need this, I need this, and I'm only going to, this is my budget. And we have to accommodate those needs and get it done while still making a profit, while still selling a quality product that isn't going to make us look like idiots or cost us money to keep going back and fixing because we chose cheaper parts in order to get a higher profit. I'd rather make a smaller profit and sell a company 100 computers over the next 10 years than make one big profit and never hear from the company again. But with consumers, when you're dealing with consumers, you're generally going to sell them one product every 10 years, maybe every 8. And so if you want to stay in business that way, that means you need enough residential customers to cover you for 8 years. before they repeat back around again, unless it's a warranty service call, which you'll be servicing at no expense to them. Or if you refuse to do that, they'll probably never come back again, and they'll tell everybody to avoid you. So that is the challenge, and that is the cakewalk for every business, really, whether it's a restaurant, a plumber. You price yourself too high, you're never going to get the work. You price yourself too low, the price is probably going to come out of your own pocket when it comes to any sort of support or warranty. If your price is too low and you won't warranty or support it, then likely you'll never get repeat business. That's a hard grind to just keep burning new customers one after the other. You get a good business client, they have a regular upgrade schedule. They have to. They want to stay in business. And it's my job to just remind them, hey, you know, that computer's 4 years old. We ought to start looking around and thinking about replacing it. Nothing we have to do today, but maybe in the next 12 months, you know, kind of plant that seed and let me know when you're ready to pursue that. I can give you a quote, and based on what you have, what we can reuse, or we can replace it altogether and keep the old one as a spare, just in case, you know, you end up hiring some temporary workers or a system goes down for a day. So that way the customers aren't in a reaction mode, they're proactive, and they know, okay, we're going to need to replace these 3 computers sometime this year before the end of 2025. Maybe we do all 3 at once, maybe we do one at a time. Whatever the customer wants to do. But what I don't like to do is say, you have to do this, you have to make a decision. That's what happens if you wait too long. If you wait too long and the system either goes obsolete because Windows 10 support has ended, or certain new products they bought, like printers and things, won't run anymore, now they're in a panic situation because the business, or at least a piece of the business, is permanently shut down until that's dealt with. There's no time to shop for best price. Now it's a question of how much are you losing because you can't use the equipment versus how much does it cost for the new equipment. And usually the cost of new equipment isn't even in the equation. It's just get it in there, do it now, get it done, send me a bill. It's a high pressure situation for the tech. It means my plans for that day are canceled. The customer's not happy. Their customers aren't happy. And I try my best to be encouraging my customers to look ahead and be ready. And hopefully we do it on our schedule. We shop around for the best price. We do it on a weekend or when the business is going to be closed or not using the machine. Sometimes the employee takes a vacation. Hey, they're gone for 2 weeks. That's a good time to upgrade their computer. This saves everybody, the employee, the company, the customers, the tech, all the stress, and it saves them money because, you know, they didn't suffer any downtime and we were able to shop around and get a good price. If you have to do something right now, like go to the emergency room versus a scheduled doctor's visit, I think you'll know firsthand if you're in the United States, doctor's visit maybe $200, an emergency room about $3,000. It's a pretty big difference to demand service now because you weren't proactive, or, you know, in the case of an emergency room, maybe an accident or unforeseen, undiagnosed condition. But you understand the gist of what I'm trying to say here. If we can plan for it, it's less stressful, it's less costly, and everybody's happier. The employee's happier, I'm happier, my customer's happier. I had a customer call me with a problem, and I said, I'm glad you called me early on this problem because it'll be easier for me to fix it now than if you waited till it got worse. And they jokingly said, yeah, that's my concern, Carey, is making your job easier. And I said, and I knew they were joking, but I said, well, it should be, because you're paying me. And the longer it takes me to fix it, the harder it is to fix, the more you're going to pay me. So if it's good for me, it's good for you. All right. Hello, everybody in the chat room. Good to see everyone here. Let me say hello. We started a little bit late today because we've had a few things going on here at Studio C. That will continue for the next few weeks throughout the month of February and maybe into March. We've got a lot of work to do. And hopefully in there I can also get some work done in the studio itself, but we're working around the outside of the studio here. And it's just, you know, one thing at a time. And then each thing I do, I try and focus on it till I get it done, move on to the next one. And of course, I don't have the budget to do it all at once regardless. So I appreciate you bearing with us as we try and balance work and life. Yeah, I'm not good with that. It's mostly work, and then life is somewhere in the smaller percentages. But let's see. We've got Eddie Casanova saying hello, and Mark Gaines. There's Frank Jimmy and Mike Ely. Maria Angelis Brazo, welcome in, Maria. Edie's Corner says hello. Jonathan and Dustin Fuller, Luan Hanna, welcome in, everybody. Gil Garcia and Ralph Kirby, Moonwolf Hunter, welcome in. Dave Leonard says hello, as does Mecca Cameron and Trajet. There's a John and a Jonathan. Welcome into the Johns. Ben Laird joins us and says hello. Of course, Mara's in the chat room, our channel administrator. She's the one who does all the fantastic thumbnails, the video descriptions, takes care of most of your emails, and also administrates on our user forum, which you can go to CareyHolzman.boards.net, and that is a message forum where you can communicate with other viewers. What are you smiling about? Why aren't you back at your computer?
You're welcome.
Are you supposed to be doing some administration?
I was getting a Dr.
Pepper. She found a new flavor of.
I want people to know that I still, to this day, absolutely love that case.
You love this computer.
And I miss it terribly.
Well, it's not going anywhere.
I like ProArt, don't get me wrong, but that was and is one of the most beautiful, fantastic PCs I ever had. And I've had a lot. So that you should be very proud of. That is absolutely stunning, beautiful. It looked good, it felt good, performance great. Everything about it was just about perfect. Until it started to struggle.
So, yeah, well, and it will live again, the $6 million PC.
Right.
Mara found a new flavor of Dr. Pepper at the store the other day. Blackberry, is it? Blackberry, and they have a zero sugar.
It's so weird. It's weirdly good, and it's surprisingly, it tastes like blackberry. It's so weird.
If I'm not there, start without me.
No problem.
Marsman50 says hello. Welcome in. Brian Rempel says hello. There's Jane Steinbreaker says hello. There's Edward. Said when my last computer upgrade was done, it took 2 minutes. I unplugged my old laptop and plugged in the new laptop. Sounds like an expensive upgrade though, but sure. I bet it was worthwhile if there's a number of years difference between the old one and the new one. Arnold Schmidt says 31 is my check-in. Welcome in, Arnold. Romex Star says hello. William says hello. William said this is why being proactive will always be a better plan than being reactive. I can't really afford to be reactive and stay in business. I do know some clients that run their computer businesses, not clients. I have some acquaintances that run their businesses based on when the phone rings. And boy, that's a tough way to go, because if the phone doesn't ring, how you're going to pay your bills at the end of the month? By being proactive and putting my customers on a retainer, they don't have to worry about it costing them any money to call me. That's often what I hear is, you know, I didn't want to pay for you to fix this minor problem, so they waited until it was a major problem, and they're going to have to pay me more, and they want me to fix it right now. When I put my customers on a retainer, and there's a couple ways that people do this. Sometimes it's just prepaid hours, right? Just pay me in advance. You average, let's say it's a business client, they average 10 hours a month of support, plus doing the backups and the updates and the PC maintenance remotely, handling their phone calls, email issues, printer issues, whatever. Let's say they average 10 hours a month. And let's say those hours are $150 an hour. I tell the customer, you know, when you go to Costco and you buy the big bulk items, they're cheaper because you're getting a discount in quantity. Well, if we're averaging 10 hours a month, why not just go ahead and pay me for 10 hours a month, 3 months at a time? All right, let's do this You're going to buy 30 hours that'll cover you from, let's say, June 1st through, let's say you go all of June, all of July, all of August, and then I'll send you another bill for 30 hours in September 1st, and that'll take you September, October, November, something like that. Right? So probably be July 1st through the end of September, and then October, November, December. You split it into 4 quarters. It's not so expensive. And if you do that, instead of paying $150 an hour, I'll charge you $100 an hour or whatever. If they want to buy more hours, I'll discount the hourly rate. So maybe from $150 to $125 for 30 hours. If you want to pay me for the whole year, we'll knock that down to $100 an hour. That encourages the customer to save some money. They, can look at the history of how they've been paying me. And then we can subtract the hours as they use them. So that's one way to do it. The other way to do it is to set up a flat rate, which is what I do when I say, look, you don't know if a tech is milking a job. You don't know if that 15-minute job is taking 2 hours because the tech has no motivation to be faster because they're paid hourly. The longer it takes them, the more money they make. By putting me on a retainer, we're going to fix your labor cost for IT within certain reasons. If you add an employee, that's not included. If you make any changes to the business, like you bought a new printer, you bought a new computer, actually they bought the computer from me, I'll take care of it. But so long as we're talking about maintaining what you have, including your backups, doing full maintenance, deleting temp files, making sure all the Windows updates are installed, upgrading them from Windows 10 to 11 as needed when they're ready, that's all bundled in and included in the price. Now they know exactly how much the labor cost is going to be for the year. I have income as a self-employed person that I can rely on. They can pay me monthly, quarterly, biannually. I'm easy. However you want to pay it. The smaller increments they want to pay, the higher up the retainer goes. The bigger the bulk purchase, the price per hour goes down. I average how many hours they need. And if I can keep under those hours, that's extra profit for me. If it's an extreme difference, if they're paying for 10 hours a month and we're only using 2, and that continues for the year, then or the opposite, if we're using 12 hours a month at the end of the year, or whatever the contract is for, we need to revisit the contract and adjust it either way. So again, I want to keep my customers happy. Nothing wrong with making a profit. If they want to average 10 hours a month, maybe that means they use 5 hours one month, 3 hours one month, 17 hours the next month. I just want to see at the end of the year that I'm somewhere within the ballpark of 10 hours average throughout the year. If it's extremely higher or extremely lower by more than, I'd say, 40%, that's when we have to renegotiate one way or the other. I'm willing to eat the 40% as long as that's not the new normal. And they're going to pay me 40% more if that becomes normal. So it's fair and balanced, it's fully transparent, and then the customer pays for whatever hardware. If they buy the hardware from me, I don't charge them anything additional for the hardware. They get it at cost, so they're saving money there, and then they're buying the hardware from the person that supports it, who's delivering it and setting it up and configuring it and maintaining it. It's a really good deal if you're a smart business person and you want to focus on your business and let somebody you know and trust take care of your IT 100%. Now, I don't fix their printers and I don't do their phones, so they have to find separate people for that. And I'm happy to give them referrals if they want. The alternative is that I could provide those services, but not at the values I offer, because I'm not going to learn how to fix their printer. As a business person, what I'm going to do is contract out to somebody else who does, and I'm going to be the middleman who bills you with profit built in the middle. Why would I do that to a customer? That's what a lot of businesses do. If you go to a home improvement store and you want an installer to put your new floor in, the home improvement store's people who would do the installation could be any of a number of companies that put in bids to work for that home improvement store, that you could have just called directly and cut the home improvement store out of the middle. The home improvement store is collecting the middleman fee. They don't do anything, they just make the connection between the installer and the person who needs the flooring installed, which you could have done yourself, but for that convenience they add that fee. I don't want to do that to my customers. I can find a guy that does VoIP and say, hey, go to this customer, install VoIP, then send me the bill, then I'll pad the bill, and I'll send it to the customer. Then I get paid to essentially do nothing. I mean, it's not bad business as far as a business model is concerned. It's just not the way I want to run my business. I'd rather just tell the customer, you should probably deal with them directly. Anyway, I'm not saying I'm a smart businessman, but I do like to offer my customers a good value. And if anybody thinks I'm not a good value, I'm not going to waste my time convincing them otherwise. Good luck to them. So that's sort of the, again, trying to keep it transparent, give you the business side of things that need to be taken under consideration. And at what point, you know, how much profit do you need to make, right? If you're having to be a middleman and something happens to you, who cares? How would you even be missed? But if you're the one doing the work, there's a difference between the person who schedules the surgeries and the person who does the surgeries. So if the person who schedules the surgeries at the hospital doesn't show into work, it's pretty easy to replace that person. But the specialist, the surgeon who doesn't show up to work, it's a tougher job to fulfill, to find a replacement for. And I want to be the surgeon. I don't want to be the scheduler, right? I want to be the person who, you know, does the bulk of the important work. Let other people deal with the other stuff. Like, I'm not the janitor. I could offer to take out their trash and mop their floors. Why not? And then I can just hire a janitorial company to come in and do it and then pad the bill. Like, where does it stop? I could offer to take their cars for an oil change and get them washed and cleaned and then just hire somebody to go and do that. And then at that point, I'm no longer a skilled service person. I'm just a scheduler. I don't want to do that with my life. That wouldn't give me much reason to get out of bed, knowing that if something happened to me, the business world would just continue to revolve regardless, and I would be easily replaced, or the customer would just take care of it themselves by picking up the phone, you know, make another phone call. So that's part of my motivation behind what I do, is I feel it's pretty important to be able to save my customers money, do a good quality job, not take them to the cleaners financially, and hopefully they'll come back to me with more work, and I'll make the money over time versus make a bunch of money today and then, you know, have a customer upset that never comes back. Because personally, finding the customer, in my experience, it's harder than doing the work based on my skills. I'm not a good salesman. I just tell it like it is. Most people like that. Some people don't like it. Some people want to be lied to. But, you know, it's not for everyone. I'm not for everyone. But when you do find the right client who sees your value, boy, they'll stay with you for, you know, for me, the business clients I have been with me, all of them, more than 10 years. And I've lost some clients due to them retiring, or the business was no longer something that the business was dying for one reason or another. Whatever field of work they were in was fading. And I've had a few customers that passed away, and nobody in the family wanted to run the business. For a customer to tell me they don't want to work with me anymore is pretty rare. That has happened, and usually they come back. One customer who did that, they just got too demanding, and I just said, look, I can't provide you this much of my time. I've got other customers to help, and you know, we were doing good, and then they just started getting more and more demanding, and I'm not capable of spreading myself that thin. So no hard feelings. You know, feel free to call me back if you you know, want to go back to the way it was, but otherwise, I'll let you do what you need to do. No hard feelings. And they ended up selling that company to another company. So even then, I would have been replaced by whatever the company that bought them. They already have their own IT solution. Why would they need me? So that has happened. I had another client that dropped me, and 5 years later, made that phone call because everything was just, they were living with problems for years. And they went through 5 techs in 5 years. Every tech doing whatever the hell they wanted because there were no written policies or procedures. and the owner of the company had no idea what's right and what's wrong. They just trusted that you're a tech. It's what it says on your resume. You must know what you're doing, and the false assumption that we all do things the same. You can imagine what a tangled ball that was to untangle. Everything from email to the NASs and all the money they spent getting that all unwound. Whew, that was a lot of work. And then after that, they shut the company down. Right after we got it all back up and running, it was another 6 or 12 months, and partly because the owner was aging out, just getting close to 80 years old, and it's like, what more can you do? And the kids don't want the business. The kids want to sell the business. So that is most commonly what happens. I'm very proud of that. I'm very proud to have customers as long as I've had, and that the ones that we haven't worked out, it's never personal. It's never like you're ripping us off, or even if they want to make that claim, they usually realize that when they get charged by other techs and start living with the problems for a longer period of time, suddenly I wasn't ripping them off anymore. You need to have something to compare me to, right? So if you don't have anything to compare me to but your imagination, you might think, I don't do anything. Systems don't break. Why are we paying you? Or the systems break all the time. Why are we paying you? It's a tough position for me to be in sometimes, but usually I just ask my customers, how much downtime have you had? Well, we've been working together. How much data have you lost? And I'm proud to say 0. For any client. No client of mine has ever lost data. No client of mine has ever had any downtime due to their server or their network being down. They might have a single machine down, but they just use another machine. It doesn't shut the whole business down. I had a client who had their cable line cut. A construction company went into the ground and cut the cable, and their business was down. They had no phones, they had no internet, they could not operate the business until the cable company re-ran that underground line. You can imagine. That was very time consuming. I think they were down at least 3 business days, and they couldn't do anything about it. Nothing I could do. It's not my fault. And then they went with a backup failover to Starlink. So if that ever happens again, they fail over to Starlink. And Starlink now offers a failover option, so you don't pay the full amount every month. It's just in case. And so Starlink realizes there's value there, that we could get customers at a lower price that are using us as a temporary stopgap infrequently when there are outages. And then there's networking equipment you can buy, including routers, even consumer-based routers, that can fail over to a secondary internet source, even a hotspot. Or they even sell, like your cellular phone provider will sell like a USB hotspot. It just plugs in the back of a lot of routers that will auto-configure to be your failover. So for consumers that just want internet, that's fine. But for businesses that their functionality, profitability relies on it, from everything from the phones, their security systems and cameras, their thermostat, although thermostat usually has manual overrides, and of course being able to help their customers to email, receive emails, all that's down when the internet goes down. And I think some business owners take that for granted until it's gone, and they realize, wow, we have so much of our business that just won't work without the internet. And many of these businesses started in the 70s, right, when there was no internet, and they have completely forgotten how to run their business the way they did in the 70s. In fact, it may not even be possible if they did remember. Not much is happening in the mail, physical mail anymore. And the ability to take credit cards. We're not using a credit card swiping thing with the 3 carbon copies. You're not do that anymore. So anyway, just a little food for thought. I thought I would just start tearing this down. It should be a relatively simple process. The only thing I didn't like about this build was the cable management is non-existent with regards to Thermaltake giving us any consideration for where our cables go. So on this side, you can see how much work I had to do. Let's take this panel off. to try and hide the cables. And with all the RGB, you know, we double the cables with RGB. Come on. Come on. There it goes. So that's a lot of zip ties, that's a lot of patience, and a lot of cursing. I'm not looking forward to undoing any of it, and I will try to keep as much of it intact as possible where possible. Thermaltake also gave us no venting for the power supply, so the fan has to face up instead of giving us holes down here for the fan to bring air in. I don't know why, with a case this big, they couldn't drill some holes and throw a little filter down there. These are fan controllers here. We have a large bundle here. We've got a bunch of cables here and here. We've got cables running down the bottom. We've got cables running across here. That's a lot of cables. Then, of course, you've got your CPU power adapter or power cable there. And yeah, I cursed the entire time. With NZXT or other cases, they give you these tracks. You just let the cables go in the tracks. There's Velcro ties. It looks beautiful. I guess this case is only meant to be looked at from one side. But that's why the fan faces up on the power supply. And the only company I know that does this regularly is Thermaltake, and I don't know why. But their case is very well made. Like it's pretty thick metal. It's not flexing at all. And flexing, I don't mean showing off. I mean it's sturdy. It's really thick metal and smooth edges. You're not going to cut your fingers like you will on the edges of, you know, cheap import cases. And for the price, it was a really good value when you consider just how much material you're getting for Thermaltake's pricing. And that's almost universally true on all Thermaltake cases. You know, for all the custom glass work and custom metal work that's done for their designs, they're relatively inexpensive compared to other companies like ASA or even NZXT for that matter, or Cooler Master. Anyway, it seems like it's good value, but part of the uniqueness of their cases is sometimes they fall a little bit short on what should be common sense, in my opinion. Did you think I wasn't going to run any cables to the motherboard, Thermaltake? Did you think I wanted my power supply fan facing up? Like, did you build in this, or have you built a computer before? Because otherwise, it's a great design. And if they simply would have, like, there's no reason to put a glass panel on this side. You know what I mean? They could have very easily just put a blacked, if they wanted to put glass, they could have blacked out the glass. They didn't have to make it clear. Like, this glass has got a slight tint, but not enough to, like, why would you put this on this side? What is there to see? And this is heavy. And cutting a custom piece of glass is a little bit pricey. That's why I'm surprised Thermaltake charges as little as they did. Not to mention this piece and this piece and this piece all have to be custom made. And then these vents that serve no purpose whatsoever are just there for looks. How much money do you think it costs for the tooling and machinery to design that and have it mass manufactured? So they definitely spent money on these cases. I don't know how they're building them and selling them so cheaply, given this is easily a $500 case any day of the week. And I don't think this case was $200. So I don't know how they do it. And of course, we built a smaller version. They have a micro ATX version of the T600, which is, I think, the T400. And it looks exactly the same, but just a little smaller. And we have that one as well sitting back here because we haven't decided what we're doing with it yet. So let me get back over to the chat here, and then we'll start tearing down. If anybody has any questions for me during today's show, it's a pretty laid-back show today, so happy to address whatever questions that I can answer. Is this a gaming computer? If you see a graphics card in a computer, that's a gaming computer, generally speaking. If you take the graphics card out of it, it's a business computer. But these days, the built-in graphics on CPUs are getting so good, they will do some gaming pretty damn good. So how you define gaming? There's no legal term for it. There's no definition of a gaming computer. If you decide you have a gaming computer, then you have a gaming computer. It's just something you make up. It's nothing that qualifies except under whatever whatever you define as a gaming computer is uniquely how you define it. But generally speaking, if it has an external graphics card on it, or not external, but discrete graphics card on it, they're typically gaming computers. Moonwolf Hunter says, what are your thoughts on gaming handheld computers? You know, back in when I was younger and we played handheld games, they looked more like this. This is no joke. This is literally what we did in the back seat of the car on a long road trip. And this is my perspective of original handheld gaming. There's electronic football. I played the heck out of this in electronic baseball. And this was handheld gaming for us in the 1970s. And we loved it, loved it, loved it. By the time any sort of handheld gaming came out that was like when it was a Game Boy or I was already so into like PC games, because at that point I would have been in my 20s. So I was into like Wing Commander, really amazing PC games that couldn't compare to like a black and white Game Boy. I wouldn't want that. That was terrible. Might as well just put it on your watch. Back then we had calculator watches too. When it comes to handhelds today, I kind of feel like all you need to do is load an app on your phone. Like this here has all the power you need for mobile gaming for most of us. And they do make, you know, gaming design phones. Asus had one, an ROG phone, and they're talking about other mobile gaming machines that just look like phones. See, kind of these, what we're calling a phone, these smartphones, kind of ruined everything, because now all of the individual gadgets we needed to control the garage door or a specialty remote to control whatever it is, you'd have to find those remotes. If those remotes broke, you had to get them repaired or replaced. But when you can put a computer with as much power in your pocket, it can do all those remotes. It has pretty much everything it needs to play all the games, to do all the remotes, to be a music player, to be a GPS, to be a camera, to be a movie camera, to be a voice translator, to be an audio recorder. You don't have to buy a separate audio recorder anymore. You don't have to buy a separate camera anymore. It's all converged into your phone. So depending on the games you want to play, for me personally, I feel like spending money on a computer for a gaming computer is an expensive luxury that costs both more time and more money than most of us have. Usually, if you have money to afford it, you're busy working and don't have time to play games. And if you have time to play games, you probably aren't sitting on a lot of money or have a lot of money coming in, making it very cost prohibitive to buy a gaming PC. And that's where Xboxes and PlayStations come in. At around the $500 price point, you're ready to roll out of the box. So when it comes to handhelds, I can't speak from any experience because there were just no handhelds that I used based on the era in which I grew up in compared to what handhelds you're probably referring to. So what's interesting to me is if I asked my father about gaming handhelds, he'd probably mentioned Othello or Yahtzee, or, you know, something, a game of cards. That was really my father's thing, was gin rummy. He liked to play gin rummy and watch sports. And I think a lot of people who watch sports are also not necessarily gamers. Like there's people who watch baseball, and then there's people who want to play, you know, baseball on a video game. Because I think, just a theory I have, You either want to actually play baseball or you want to play video games. And I think the people who want to actually play baseball are more interested in watching baseball. And the people who play baseball video games are also playing Call of Duty, and they're not necessarily a lot of variety of baseball games to choose on your PC. It's just one of a genre. And so depending on how you're using your PC for gaming, whether it's esports, or it could be older gaming like World of Warcraft, it can be very extreme difference in what the requirements are for that game to play smoothly, whereas you just buy an Xbox or a PlayStation. And it's so much easier. And at the end of the day, it can cost 75% less or more. So, yeah. And I also want you to understand, as a teenager in the 1980s, the arcade was the place to go. And what arcades did that I think is far superior to gaming today is it forced everybody to use the same controller at the same height, at the same frame rate. Everything was the same. So in other words, you couldn't outspend somebody with better equipment to give you an advantage in the game. You had to use the same controller. Didn't matter if you're right or left-handed. You had to look at the same screen, at the same resolution, at the same frame rate. And the people you were competing against were generally right there in the room. Or you would compete against anonymous people in the high scoreboard that you would try to achieve your name somewhere in the top 5 or top 10 scoreboard, but you didn't necessarily know who they were. Like there's one guy, super famous guy, and his name was all over the high scoreboards all across the United States. And all we know are his initials, ASS. That guy is amazing. And you couldn't go into an arcade without seeing the initials ASS on the leaderboard. Man, I want to meet that person. It's kind of true. All right. Mark Gaines with a 10-pound super chat says, I sent you a little something for the channel. Well, let me check on that. Thank you, Mark. And Samuel Kowalski renews membership, now a member for 13 months. Thank you, Samuel. Hey, there's our buddy Mitch Morrison joining us in the chat room. Hey, little buddy. I don't know, he calls me Chuckles. I call him little buddy. I've just decided to start that today. Then when he squishes me like a bug, I'll probably call him sir. Let's see. See how well I do without my glasses on. An Amazon gift card from Mark Gaines. Mark contributes $50 on an Amazon gift card. Thank you, Mark. And we got a PayPal contribution from Bill Bennett. Sent $5 via PayPal. Thank you guys very, very much for your continued support. The best way I can explain this is I consider it like a tip. It's never expected in any amount, in any frequency ever, is always appreciated. And I can't thank you guys enough because we just spent, well, it's another story, but I'm still putting together parts for another build for the channel. It's not going to a customer. Hopefully one day it will, but I was stuck on a cooler. I need a liquid cooler for the looks, for the aesthetics. And I was going to do like all Corsair Corsair case, Corsair cooler, Corsair power supply. Until I saw the prices. Corsair wants $199 for a 240 millimeter RGB IQ liquid cooler. $200 for the cooler? $240? And I thought, you guys have been talking a lot about Thermaltake. I don't really have any experience with them, but Thermaltake has the identical cooler, as far as I can tell, without the IQ software and the Corsair tax, for $60. $200, $60. In the case we order, it needs a rear fan. The Corsair RGB white rear fan is like $30. Thermaltake has an identical fan, RGB, 4-pin PWM, $13. Oh, and it comes with 3 of them. 3 fans for $13, 1 fan from Corsair. Are they making that much money? So we're going to experiment, again, because it's not going to a customer. Let's see how difficult or how easy the Thermaltake cooler is, how quiet it is, and how effective it is. I don't expect it to be identical to a $200 cooler, but I don't expect it to be $140 difference. Like, I can buy 3 of those and have change left over compared to one Corsair cooler. So that Corsair cooler better be amazing. It's a real eye-opener to see just how much money companies like NZXT and Corsair are making. And, you know, especially when you consider how much case you get for the money from Thermaltake, for example, it's time to start looking at Thermaltake. I got a feeling, I am going to make a prediction, that Thermaltake may not be the best cooler you can buy, but it might be the best. How can I phrase this? I predict the Thermaltake cooler won't be the best cooler money can buy, but the best cooler you can buy for the money. I hope that's true. We don't necessarily need a leaderboard of coolers, especially because we're putting it in this future build. It's only going to be a Ryzen 5. We don't even need a liquid cooler on it. An air cooler will be fine. It's just that I want it to look a certain way. That's it. And honestly, $60 for a 240mm RGB all-in-one cooler versus $60 for a white air cooler, it's the same price. So it's not even a sacrifice financially to go for those aesthetics. Unless the cooler is crap or difficult to install or not reliable or doesn't do a good job cooling, but we're not throwing a Ryzen 9 under it. So I think it's going to be fine. And just that one part, by switching away from Corsair and going to Thermaltake, is a $140 difference. And we're getting 3 fans for 1/3 the price of 1 fan from Corsair. Are they quiet? Will they last as long? I hope you'll join us. A couple weeks, we should have all the parts in. And that'll be on the new B850 motherboards coming out from Gigabyte that aren't released yet. Or they're released, but they're not shipping yet. As soon as they ship, we'll get one. We'll schedule that build. All made possible through your contributions. Nobody sent us anything as far as, like, Corsair's not sending us stuff. NZXT's never sent us anything. We go out, we buy the components, and then we're free to review them and build them. And we don't have to answer to anybody but you guys. So we appreciate your suggestions, and many of this wouldn't happen not only without your contributions, but without your suggestions as well. So we thank you for that and for being a part of this community, which is so cool that I get to enjoy what I'm doing and people get to appreciate it. So keeps everybody happy. Troll McTrollington just became a supporter. Right on. Thank you for that. He contributes $5 Canadian, says, I like how the helicopter looks. It's not a big fan, though. Oh, he's not a big fan of the OG Threadripper got smoked by the AM459. Well, sure, but that's just technology advancing, you know, when you think about how much time has passed and also what the chip is used for. Threadripper chips aren't for gaming. I mean, you're just wasting it. It's like buying a school bus. When you're single, you live alone, and you don't take anyone anywhere. What do you do with the school bus? What do you do with all that extra room and the poor gas mileage and the added expense that it costs to buy it? It's just not the right vehicle for you. But on the other hand, go the other way, say you've got to take 30 kids to school, you probably don't want to shove them in your Honda Civic. The Threadripper is a school bus. And if you don't have reason for a school bus, and not many people at home do, you probably won't see much advantage to owning one. The problem gets to be not only in the frequency and performance of the cores, but also in how many lanes of traffic it can handle and how many lanes of RAM it can handle. So you can add a lot more RAM and a lot more I/O, and you might say, well, why would I need that? Right, back to a school bus. But a business, on the other hand, can say, this is great for now until we can get some more. So you got to use the right tool. And just because there's a bigger, badder chip out there doesn't necessarily mean it will benefit you to have it. If you have it and you're not using all of it, why did you spend so much to get so much more than you really needed? And you're not going to see the value in it because you're not using it for the purpose it was intended. If I get a straight edge screwdriver, flat blade screwdriver, and start using it with a hammer as a chisel, you know, it doesn't work that well. I can make it work, but it's not very good. It might break the screwdriver, not to mention whatever I'm trying to chisel. But they do sell chisels. But if I take the chisel and I try and take screws out with it, maybe, you know, some people use a butter knife to take out screws. You're working hard, man. You got no electrical protection there, insulation. Use the right tool for the right job, and you will spend less and likely be happier with your purchase for a longer period of time, unless your needs change. But we do want to see the technology advance. We want to see that. We want to see Threadripper level performance trickling down into the consumer base. And that's what's happening. But now there's new Threadrippers, right? And then they smoke, you know, it's the same story over and over again. The Threadripper usually introduces levels of I/O. That means storage, the amount of storage you can have, how much of it you can have, simultaneously along with how many sticks of RAM you can have, you know, quad channel. It's insane. But if you're just using it for gaming or something, you're just wasting it. There's no benefit to you, but it's, you know, triple the price. So yeah, tools, the right tool for the right job. FM Lazar with a $5 super chat said, my console is my Amiga 500 Mini. Yeah, those little mini PCs they're coming out with that are retro to the Ataris and Commodores. You know, in this case, the Amiga, which is Commodore. It's pretty crazy that, you know, they've taken these boxes from the 80s and shrunk them down to something this big that are nearly 100% compatible, even though they're not using the same chips, their emulation. And it's amazing, just amazing. I bought a little mini Atari 400, which was one of the first computers I owned. And I bought it because it played the arcade games as close to the way the arcade was at the time. The Atari 2600, no. We had one, but the games sucked. The arcade, though, if I had $5, I'd get 20 quarters. I could burn through those pretty quickly. I'd spend the rest of my time watching other people play, wishing I had more money. So with the Atari 400, with the flat memory and keyboard, I could go to computer clubs and we could swap discs, or we could buy the little cartridges, which were similar but different than the Atari 2600. And when I played Pac-Man on an Atari 400, it was very, very close to Pac-Man at the arcade. Of course, we were using just an 8-way joystick with one fire button, which was not how it was in the arcade. There's no fire button on Pac-Man, for example. But the music and the graphics were so close. It was only the controller that was different. Well, the graphics were a little different, but they were so close. And that was what got me into computers, was gaming. It's just that what we defined as gaming has changed. Thank you, FM Lazar, for your super chat. And thank you, of course, to Mark Gaines and Troll McTrollington. Peter VZ contributed €1 just a little bit ago, and I missed it. Thank you, Peter. Speaking of Peter, I don't see our friend Buster in there, but we did give late notice on the show, and it's pretty late there in Scotland. So I know he'll watch this later. A shout out and hello to our friend Buster. And we have to include Frankie B. Oystein, Charlie Purdy, Phil Stodd, William Denton, Oystein. It's going to be somebody I always forget. These are folks that are just like super members here. They contribute frequently, and without them, we wouldn't have a lot of our content, especially Buster, especially. Okay, so I guess the chat room's pretty quiet here. FM Lazar's talking about that little Amiga. He says, despite its name, it's effectively an Amiga 1200 with the ability to emulate RTG graphics and hackers have found ways to run it as a full computer. Just a little history. With the Atari 400, I could have also had like a Commodore VIC-20. The Commodore didn't compete. And there was sort of the, almost like PC versus Apple, there was the Atari versus Commodore people. There were a lot of Commodore people. There's no argument Commodore sold a lot more units. But that's what made being the Atari owner feel superior. In many ways, they were very similar. But the boasting that would go on from one side to the other, I think, encouraged this sort of pride that, thank goodness I'm from my perspective, I've got the better machine. From their perspective, they're probably thinking the same thing. They got the better machine. So when the VIC-20 was out and the Atari 400, and then they came out with the Commodore 64, then Atari came out with like the Atari 1200, and then Commodore eventually came out with the Amiga, Atari came out with the Atari ST. It was just a constant back and forth. And Commodore was sold far more units in both Commodore 64 and Amigas compared to Atari STs. That makes the Atari ST much more valuable because it's rarer. So it depends on how you want to look at it. But when you say Commodore to me, you might as well say Apple. Like, to me, that was the enemy. But admittedly, they were pretty similar in capabilities all the way in that time, machine to machine. They were very, very similar. All right, time to start unplugging some things. Troll McTrollington with $3.50 Canadian says the Loch Ness Monster is back. Beware the cores. That's a South Park reference, where the guy says Chef's parents in South Park are talking about how they had encountered the Loch Ness Monster. They were on a little rowing boat, and this big monster came out of the water, beady red eyes, and they were just dwarfed by the size comparison. Big monster. And they said, "Monster, what do you want?" And the monster got down and looked at him, and he said, "About $3.50. So stupid, it's funny. So there's $3.50 from Troll McTrollington. Thank you, Troll McTrollington. Wow, these power cables on the graphics card, they've been in there so long, they don't want to come out. What I'll do is I'll squeeze the clip and wiggle gently left and right while pulling at the same time, and that should eventually get them to loosen. Don't use brute force, just a wiggle and pull. This is true on almost any type of connector. If you were taking the terminals off the battery of your car, you would unscrew the negative terminal first, and you would start to wiggle and, in the case, pull up or pull off to the side. And that's how you coerce it out. You don't just brute force it out. Otherwise, you might find you've damaged something in the process. So when it comes to any sort of plug, you don't pull it by the wires, you use the end piece. Pull it by here. If you pull any plug, even a plug you plug into the wall, and you pull it by the wires, that's how you break the wall jacks, and that's also how you, with wires like this, you end up pulling some of the wires out of the connector. And it's just being lazy. If you want to do it, but know what to expect if you go that route. Now, with regards to taking out the motherboard, I suppose the first thing I need to do is just take all of the additional cables off, knowing we're going to keep the liquid cooler attached. So that means if we just look around the base of the board, most of these cables are just friction fit cables, meaning you just pull them straight off. Again, a wiggle and pull at the same time. And we'll just go right across the bottom of the board here and just disconnect everything. They're all standard USB, audio, front panel. It's all the same stuff. So I don't have to worry about remembering where it goes, because on the replacement board, whatever we put in here, it's going to have the same headers, probably slightly located differently. So the cable management may have to be modified to reach, because I made this pretty tight. That's our audio header there. And then up here we have our USB 3 header. We have our USB 3.1 right there. This is our main motherboard power. Push in the clip, wiggle and pull. See how easy these come out? And if we do get one that's stubborn, or the cable's too tight, then obviously we may have to cut some zip ties to give us a little bit more slack, depending on how tight we made the cable management. And we have to make sure we're pushing those clips all the way in, or we could break the clip. Remember, there's nothing wrong with this motherboard. It's just older. And I don't want to keep it in a fancy case. What I will do with this board is I'll put it into a cheaper case, and then I'll sell it used. I've got a gentleman who likes to buy the older stuff from me. He'd like to buy the newer stuff at the older stuff prices, but I can't afford to give him half off of what I paid, just so he can make that money when he sells it. But when we have equipment like this, which, this was a flagship chip, the 10900K, The RAM we used is G-Skill Trident. This was an expensive build. It's still very capable today, but not to the owner's standards. You know who I'm talking about. Somebody has very high standards, very demanding. And that's okay. That keeps me in business. I'm happy with that. Now, I'm not exactly sure how I'm supposed to get to these screws. There's a panel right here that's blocking the ability to reach the screws. I don't remember dealing with this before. Does this have a tray that comes out and I'm forgetting? No, even if it did, I don't want to undo all my cable management. So how am I going to do this? How did I get those screws on that are basically in the way? Maybe I can angle the driver. Yeah, I think that's gonna work. I'll just angle the driver. That makes me nervous. That's a pretty significant angle. It's a good way to cam out the tops of the screws. But thankfully they're not in there super tight and they're short. So it'd be a bigger concern when we're putting the screws back in that we don't cross thread them, but taking them out, just requiring a little bit of creative angle there. Now I suppose if we took the top off, we might be able to get this bracket off. I do feel a couple of screws up here, and maybe this whole bracket comes off. There's probably a screw or something down here as well. I don't want to do that much work just to have to put it back in again. Simply to remove a graphics card seems like, well, more work than I want to put into it, if I'm honest. This is our GTX, RTX 3080. Still a really good graphics card by today's standards, and a big one. That is a chunky boy. And again, no problems with any of it. Just time for an upgrade. And for those who can afford it, why not? And for those who can't afford it, if this is what you have, it's nothing to complain about. It's still really good. Now I'm going to take the network card out. This was an add-in card, so we could go to 10 gig. And we don't have any use for that today, but I will put it back on my shelving unit. Probably put a post-it note on it so I remember that that's a 10 gig card. These are about $80. And of course, that's only good if you have a 10 gig switch or a 10 gig router, along with some other PC or network attached device that can move data at 10 gig. We don't have anywhere near 10 gig internet, so we don't need that. It's not making our internet any faster. Maybe someday. But that's sort of the latest and greatest in home networking, which also means it's not very common and it's quite expensive compared to 1 gig networking, which is the most common. And of course, you have to make sure you have certain cables no longer than a certain length for this to work optimally. Whereas with 1 gig networking and even 2.5 gig networking, you don't really have as big of a concern in that regard. It's all about, you know, how much money do you want to spend? The difference is, though, there is 25 gig, 50 gig, and 100 gig networking too, but that's in business and it's tens of thousands of dollars. It's not, you know, if you think this is expensive, that ain't nothing. But there's nothing wrong with the network. It's built into this motherboard, which is probably a 2.5, if I had to guess. This also has built-in Wi-Fi. Now, you know, Wi-Fi has improved since this motherboard came out. We're at Wi-Fi 7 now. And again, it's not going to make your internet any faster. Not for most people. And I do have a dust cover in the HDMI port of this motherboard I need to take out. And I do that so people don't accidentally plug their video card into the motherboard when they have a discrete graphics. They often pick the top one. And then I get a phone call going, how come everything's so slow in my gaming? So I make it a habit to just take these little dust covers and pop them in there. And Dell and HP and all the others also do the same thing. It avoids a support call. Remember, they don't make money on support calls. And if you just put a cover in it so the customer can't use it, customer never has that problem and never calls for support. But I think we're going to go back to onboard video. Since this is an older system now, I don't see any reason to spend money on a graphics card just to lose money on selling it. So we'll let whoever buys it put that expense into it if they want to do that. And these little dust covers, you know, I keep a little Ziploc bag of them. So in the future, if that comes up again, I just plug the one I don't want the customer to use. I'll do the same with like a network port. This is a 2.5 gig network port back here. And if we add another network card to it, the customers, if they move the computers, they can often plug into the wrong one. And that means that either they're not getting the speeds or one has been disabled, like the built-in one will be disabled to save system resources. And they go, the network doesn't work. All I did is move the computer and plugged everything back in. And so what I do there is I'll just take just the end of an RJ45 plug. You can just buy the plugs and crimp it down with no cable in it and just stick it in the hole. Then it's not available. The customer has no idea. They just, oh, there's the hole they plug in. It's a support call you never get because you've prevented the customer from making that mistake. Okay, so these cables are all out. This one's out. I'm just checking if I've missed anything. We have a connector going to the block. Where's that going? Oh boy. That is going, yikes. That is going, it's cable managed along the back into a fan controller. Right back here. You see there's two fan controllers. That one's going to the block. And it's all been zip tied. So all this has to come out, including this wire here, which is also zip tied. So as much as I don't want to undo my cable management, in order to move this motherboard to a cheaper, more normal case, I want to reuse this case for a motherboard that is, you know, as strong and boastful as the case is, which 4 years ago was this motherboard, but today, not so much. So, despite me not wanting to undo all of my creative hard work in putting these cable ties on, away they go. It's not like they cost a lot of money. It's just the patience and time it takes to figure out where you're going to route them, how you're going to secure them. And back in the day when I was building computers in the 90s and even the early 2000s, we didn't do any of this because more or less you put one or two cable ties on, you were done. Cases did not have case windows. There wasn't glass panels. Nobody saw inside. We were just trying to keep the cables out of the way of the fans and out of the way of any future work where the cables might get in our way. We tie them up and move them off to the sides. But usually the only people who ever saw those cables were the people who would take the covers off, which was typically not the customer. So I wasn't necessarily doing it for the customer. I was doing it for me. So in time, when the computer comes back for an upgrade or for any reason, I wouldn't have to struggle so much to work around the cables. But now this has taken a whole nother level of computer building where we're spending so much time on some of these builds with liquid cooling and RGB that's mostly unnecessary. It can be quite challenging and quite time consuming to spend that effort. It's one thing if you're at home and you just have a little project. It's another thing if you've got 10 of them to build and you won't get paid until they're all done. And, you know, if it looks terrible, customer may not be too impressed, may not order from you again. So again, just want to share with you some of the challenges between what you do at home versus if you do it for somebody else for a living, and the scale, how many of them you're going to do, and how 10 extra minutes becomes 100 extra minutes times 10. See what I'm saying? So at least zip ties are cheap. That's the good news. Because quite often when I cable manage, I don't get it right the first time and I have to undo. Like with this build, I probably rerouted the cables 2 or 3 times before I was happy with it. Or I was happy with it till I routed the next one and then realized, oh, should have did this one first. So course, if you're building the same machine 10 times, you'll do the same cable management. But I don't do that, right? This is the only one I've ever built like this. I do have the smaller version, but that's entirely different. It just looks the same, but the cable management and the motherboard, they're all very different. All right, so with that undone, right, this is the essentially the header that goes to the fan controller. That's going to control the RGB on the pump. This is completely unnecessary. The pump works to cool without the lights and without, I don't know. It's really hard to understand consumers when you get so much more business from businesses. That's where the real money is. Some of this just feels very hobby, right? And a hobby is great. If you're spending money to do your job, it's not a job. If you're getting paid to do a job, that's the difference between a job and a hobby. One you're paying to do, and one you're getting paid to do. So people just don't pay me to do this. Businesses don't. It does look good. It looks good. But it costs a lot more money. It takes a lot more time. And the system doesn't run any better. It's the same security, the same reliability, the same performance. So yeah, that's my struggle. Why? Why are we doing this? But it does look good. All right, I guess we can take out all but one of these motherboard screws. 1, 2. The third one, yeah. 3, 4. Darn it. I think my magnet's getting weak on my screwdriver. I'm going to leave that middle one in. Let's go to 5. Did I take that one out? There it is. Six. Darn it. Keep dropping them. Another good reason to not have your power supply facing fan up is if a screw falls into the vent holes. But thankfully, Thermaltake's thought of that, and the vent holes are very narrow, and a screw will not fall into them. This is high voltage in here, and if a screw falls in there and you don't get it out, or you didn't even realize it was in there and you plug it in, there's a good chance there's going to be a little pop and flame and smoke. And it could damage everything that's plugged into it. So it's another reason why I don't like the fans facing up. But if they are going to face up, pay attention to how wide the gap is. Be Quiet sells power supplies where the gap is very wide and a screw can fall in there. And I've asked them to justify this, and they had no justification. There was no reason for the holes to be that big, and they simply hadn't considered it. It was purely a style. They were looking for a certain look, and they hadn't considered what would happen if a screw fell in there. You'd think a company that big would know better. And what's worse is when I brought it to their attention and they couldn't justify it to me besides looks, they still didn't change it, as far as I know. So you don't see a lot of Be Quiet products here anymore. I think our values are different. They make good products at a good price. I like their products, but sometimes their designs, I fail to wrap my head around what they were thinking. Trying to find the screw I dropped. There it is. Yeah, my magnet is definitely getting weak on here. That should help. Now I've left one screw in because I don't want the board to fall out. And I don't want to leave one of the corners in, especially not the bottom corner, because then the top will take gravity and it'll crack the corner off the board and we can just throw it away. There's nothing wrong with this board. Let's not damage it. So I've left one screw in the middle. But remember, that's the only screw now holding this board up. Now normally, when working on most cases, I would lay the case flat so I don't have to worry about the board falling out. You could take the screws out in any order you want. But if I'm doing this on camera or with a case like this where it's got these posts that stick out and I'll gouge into my table, it makes more sense to work on it upright, especially if you're making a video and you want to show people. So in that case, we have to consider gravity and the weight of things. And if we just left one screw down here in the corner, this whole top could just start to lean forward and fall out, except that piece would be secured and the whole board would crack, and that would be done. We might as well just throw it into the trash. So if you can, if you're following along, lay the case flat, and then you could take the screws out any order you want. We're going to have the same struggle with the radiator. The radiator has about 12 screws that hold it in, and we're going to take out all but 2. So I'm going to leave opposite corners at the far ends of the radiator. We can leave the fans screwed in, that's fine. But when we come around this side, we're going to remove everything but 2 opposite corners. And then we'll strategically remove the first screw, will be the lowest one. So again, gravity won't fall up. And the last screw we'll leave will be up in the top corner. And when we're ready to take that off, we got to figure out if the radiator is attached to the board and we take the board out first, where do we put it? It's only going to go the length of the hoses. And if we take this piece off first, then the answer to that is just take the cooler completely off. But that's more work than I want to do. So I got to figure out this little balancing act, but it won't be the first time. And as long as we're patient and we think it through, being proactive instead of reactive, we should be able to control this demolition, if you will, with very little damage. All right, so we're just going to take out, like I said, there's 2, 4, 6. Whoops. I am just dropping screws today. Okay, we have a couple of screws that are kind of hidden by parts of the case that may have to be removed. Let's see. Get to this screw over here. Now, when you're dealing with cases this big, quite frequently they have the whole tray the motherboard connects to will come out. And if this tray comes out, which I think it does, as long as we're not tethered to anything other than the radiator, we should be able to pull the whole piece out. Except I do have some cable management that's connecting to the back of the motherboard tray, which means I'm going to lose all that cable management. And I'm trying to avoid that. Sometimes me trying to avoid doing extra work creates more extra work than if I just would have bit the bullet and just did it. And I'm starting to have that thought right now, because what I'm concerned about is I have this cable here that's attached to the motherboard tray, but if that's going to this fan controller that goes to the block that's coming off anyway, there's nothing I can do to avoid it. And if I look down here just to see if there's anything else attached to the motherboard tray, oh boy, I don't know. Maybe something I just have to get in there and figure out. So to take the tray out, we have a couple of screws down here. There's 1, 2, 3. Looks like 3 there. And then up at the top, it looks like we've got 1, 2. So these top ones will come out real easy. And the radiator is connected to the tray. So by taking the tray out, then I don't have to take, like this whole top piece comes off, this piece comes off, and I can get to the radiator that way. I'm debating with myself which way I want to go about this. It's absolutely one of the things I love the most about working on computers is that I can go at it from any angle I want, and somebody else can go at it from a completely different angle and a different disassembly process. They might do less work, they might do more, or the opposite. And as long as we get to the end result, it doesn't really matter, so long as it made sense to the person who did it and we end up with a quality job regardless of the order that we went about taking it apart or how much we took apart. Some people will take every single thing apart and then clean it, only so it gets put back together to get dusty again. I don't understand. There's some videos out there on YouTube where people will tear down a computer just to clean it, and I mean down to the screws, only to put it right back together and give it back to the customer who's going to put it in the same environment, and it's just going to get dusty again. Like, I don't understand the point of that. All it's going to do is go right back to being dusty, and dusty isn't bad. They're doing it so it'll look good. So when the customer gets it back, it looks like new. And then in a few months, it'll look exactly like it did before all that work was done, making that work completely pointless, in my opinion. Now, if the work was being done so that it would avoid it from getting that dirty in the future, sign me up. I had cracked the front air dam of my Mini Cooper, and the Mini Cooper dealer, when I took it in for an oil change, gave me an estimate for thousands of dollars. Or what's this? They said that's to replace the front air dam. I'm like, why? They said, because it's cracked. I go, yeah, because I parked it too close to a cement parking brick and it cracked it. So I guess you guys have a new one now that doesn't crack? No. So I'm going to pay you all this money to replace it, to get rid of the crack. You have to paint match it. It's all this thousands of dollars just so I can park it once more and crack it again? What's the point? You know, make it out of nylon instead of plastic, and then it'll bend and flex and it won't crack anymore. Then offer it to me. But if all you're doing is selling me something that's just going to break the same way, just leave the broken one on. But I guess that's how they make money. I don't know. Take a look here in the chat and see what I'm missing. Paul House says he's got stage 4 lung cancer. Wow. Sorry to hear that. Were you a smoker, Paul? I'm just curious. Oof. We're here. We'll keep you distracted if nothing else. And you know, there's no set time limit for any of our lives, regardless of any medical diagnoses. So, well, it's not a good diagnosis. It doesn't necessarily mean the end is near. We hope you'll be with us for a long time. He says he's not feeling well because he's short on breath. Yeah, I can imagine that's not a pleasant feeling. Well, we're thinking of you, and we enjoy having your company here, and I hope that we can keep you distracted. Hopefully tomorrow will be a better day. Ricky Moore said he had a Fairchild Channel F video game system. I never even heard of that. I must have been like 5 or something. Jason Wyrick said the PCs in the at the pediatric office are all Core 2 Duo. Not Windows 11 compatible. Yeah, not anywhere near Windows 11 compatible. Would you encourage or discourage getting a bunch of N100 mini PCs since they don't need much? Listen, an N100 mini PC is going to make a Core 2 Duo left in the dust. Don't discourage an N100 mini PC comparing it to the latest and greatest flagship processors. If you're comparing an N100 to a Core 2 Duo, it's like comparing a brand new low-end budget machine to, let's see if I can look up the initial release date of a Core 2 Duo. Core 2 Duo 2006. So there, if you want to take something low-end budget in 2025 and say, how do you think this would compare to a mid-range computer from, say, 2006, nearly 20 years ago? There's no comparison. The N100 will blow it out of the water. You might as well, I mean, if that's what somebody's been using as a Core 2 Duo for the last nearly 20 years, an N100 is going to seem like a spaceship rocket ship by comparison. Now, if the customer was using high-end i7, i9s from, say, 2015 on, an N100 would still seem pretty adequate, but may not be that sensation they had when their computer was new. But the N100 will be the fastest computer they've ever owned if that's what they're running today. I would have no hesitation in recommending an N100 for that customer, and they better not expect to get 20 years out of it either, because they're cheap and they're disposable. Paul said, I think maybe he was a smoker, that he stopped 16 years ago. He was diagnosed in 2022. Yeah, sometimes it's environmental, right? Sometimes it's how we treat our bodies, you know. There's people that have smoked their whole lives and never got lung cancer. I'm just curious because sometimes it makes sense. Like someone says, yeah, I'm a chain smoker and I got lung cancer. And you go, well, okay, I mean, it's terrible, but at least I understand why it happened. And other people, it could be environmental, it could be genetic. Regardless of why, we certainly are sad to hear that you've got that diagnosis, but that we're happy you're still with us and that we are honored with your presence here in our community, and we hope that stays that way for a long time. Sometimes with medical conditions, your attitude can make a bigger difference than the medicine. But, you know, it's one thing to say it, it's another thing to do it. I'm not saying it's easy. I do think it's worth it, but what do I know? But we do hope you get to feeling better soon. What was I doing? Oh, I was going to take this motherboard tray out, wasn't I? Okay, where was I? We have these screws up here. Yeah, I'm just thinking I'd rather take out the motherboard tray than disassemble all the pieces in the front to get to the screws in the back of the radiator. Also, that would have made it a lot easier for me to remove the add-in cards with this support bracket in the way. Now, had I thought of this, I should have done this first, because you see how wobbly this motherboard is in here with only one screw holding it in. By taking out the motherboard tray, we can then just move the case off the table, lay the tray down, and just work on the tray, which is, on a case this big and a table this small, makes life a lot easier. So sometimes work a little harder than I really need to. And sometimes it takes me a while to realize, as I've dug into it, I probably could have done this a more efficient way. Again, when you're working on the same equipment over and over, it's easy to conclude that this is the only case like this I have, and it goes together differently than any other case I have. So because I haven't really worked on it in 4 years, I don't really remember. But like anything else, we figure it out as we go. Now those thumb screws are very short. The ones that go along the bottom here, I want to remember that those are the short ones. And I'm sure they're short for a reason. The threads are maybe 1/4 of an inch long, and the other ones are closer to under 1/2 an inch long. Now what you've got to keep in mind is all of the front port I/O is attached right up here, and all of that's been cable tied down to the panel we're about to remove. So I'm going to have to cut away a lot of my cable management, which, you know, I don't know. Now I'm having second thoughts about my second thoughts. Maybe I would be better off taking the panels off. I can't make up my mind. The good news is nothing I've taken off is anywhere near as difficult as putting back the cable management, at least for me. Not a big fan of it. This whole top piece does come off real easily though, and I can't remember what's under there, but that might give us enough room to get the screws out of the top of the radiator. But we got these two giant, very similar to the glass, but a little different. That's the other thing, is remembering where the screws go. It'd be nice if they used 1 or 2 of the same screw, but We've got 4 different types of screws so far we've removed, from the motherboard to the thumb screws here, to the thumb screws here, to the thumb screws here. They're all different, and they won't fit back right if you use the wrong ones. And you may not realize that if, for example, this longer screw does fit in there, the shorter one probably won't go through the thickness of the glass, and you'll be trying to figure out, why isn't this glass going back on? Then you have to take off this, figure out where is it, and redo it again. Anyway, these 2 thumb screws on each side are what hold what I consider to be Darth Vader's helmet on. Just the top of it. She lifted right off. I remember that. Unless there's something else I'm forgetting, I think that just lifts up and back. Or straight up. There we go. See, just like the top of Darth Vader's helmet. But you can see we still have, well, first of all, we have a lot of dust in there. Again, to clean this, no one's going to see it. It's just going to get dusty again. I will clean it because I'm here, but I wouldn't disassemble this to this level just to wipe down the dust. That's just going to come right back in a couple of months. Okay, does that expose that screw? It does not. Bummer. Bummer, bummer. So here's my challenge, is I have some screws at the top and bottom of this radiator. I've got to get behind this, and I've got to get behind down here. And the question is it easier for me to just remove the motherboard tray, or is it easier for me to now take this piece off, take these side pieces off? It's great that they come off, you know? I love that I can tear it down basically to a frame. What I don't love is that each piece, like these screws here, they're unique. They don't match anything else. The screws we just took off don't match anything else. The screws that hold the glass on don't match anything else. And if I don't remember where to put those screws, even the thumb screws that hold the motherboard tray on, some of those are taller threads, some of them are shorter threads. You might think they're all the same until you go to put the shorter threads on where longer threads are needed, and they won't reach. Then you got to figure out, because they all look the same at the other end, you have to screw each one out until you find the longer threads and say, okay, the shorter thread goes there. So if you can keep note of what you're taking out, for me, I have a video documentation of what I'm doing, so I can always play the video back. The more time passes before I put this back together, the more I'm not going to remember where these all go. That was just a PCI slot cover that was kind of hiding that bottom spot there on the video card. What do I want to do? What do I want to do? Is there anything else holding this board in? I mean, I don't see anything. I don't know why this whole motherboard tray isn't just willing to pop itself right out, unless I'm missing a screw that's holding it in somewhere. See any? Oh, there is one. So down here from our I/O, there's a screw. I can't see it because the cables are covering it, but I can see the other end of it coming through right here at the top of the motherboard tray. So that mystery is resolved. I can also see it through the glass. I can see the screw. It's the same thumb screw that we removed down here, or set the removed ones down there. And with this long, narrow screwdriver, I should be able to just fit it right between those cables. Yeah. And that is a regular length screw. So the short ones are on the bottom only of the motherboard tray. Now, in theory, this motherboard tray should be mobile. No, there's still something else holding us in. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3, 4. Sometimes there may be a screw or something holding it in this way, but I don't see that. Top is very loose, the bottom not so much. Something still got us on the bottom here, and give me a minute. I will figure this out. That's all radiator. I'll tell you what, I think I'm going to have to undo this cable right here, this cable tie. I think it might be giving us a little bit of grief. And you notice when I cut cable ties off, I use angled cutters, and that way I don't cut through the cables by mistake, because that can be a very expensive mistake. You want to ask me how I know? I saw an electrician trying to cut zip ties with a big pair of like standard angle cutters for like electrical cables. He's like using a massive tool to cut a little delicate zip tie, and he struggled to get it. You know, there was a big part of the zip tie that was just left, which is a sharp edge, because he didn't use the right tool. He's like $6. I don't know what the big deal is. Where are we at? That screw's removed, that screw's removed. Come on, work with me here. Still feel like something on the bottom is holding us in, but I don't see anything. Yeah, it looks like it should slide right out. Something is preventing us. What am I missing? I guess it's time for the flashlight. I already got the glasses. Let's see if I can identify what is holding us in. I don't see it. Just checking the bottom, checking the edges, checking the top. I don't see any other screws poking through. Looking to see if anything screws into the front of it. I don't see anything there. Looks like it's a metal piece, and the motherboard tray slides in, and then the screws lock it in. So it could be my cable management is so tight that it's not allowing us. I would just think the cables would flex enough to let me move this, but I could be wrong. We're attached to these power cables here that could be a problem. So definitely the power supply cables have to come out. Like this one is dangling here. And we've got power going to the fan controllers, and we've got power going to the motherboard here. That's why, you know, this dilemma that I have of just taking the front of the case apart versus trying to get this tray out. See how loose that motherboard is. We're this close from removing the motherboard. It's the radiator that I'm concerned about getting to the removal screws here. I can see if I just want to get to the radiator screws, where they're hidden basically is there's one behind this canopy. So this canopy has to come off, and then there's about 3 or 4 behind this piece here. And this is a plastic cover that then reveals another piece that has to come off. What did I get myself into? You'd think this is a 5-minute job, and on any other case it probably would be, but this is what happens when you want to go for those unique aesthetics. There's nothing unique about this process. It definitely takes longer and it costs more, and it's going to cost more to upgrade, repair, and maintain. So that's why it's great for a hobbyist or a business that just has a lot of money to spend in IT, I suppose. I still feel like there's a screw here somewhere I'm not seeing. There's got to be an explanation, and it's probably staring me right in the face. Honestly, even if I could slide the tray back enough to get to the screws at the back of the radiator, I don't necessarily need the whole tray out. So if I can get enough slack from the cables to slide this back an inch or two, that's all I need. But something has really got us held in place. And I'll be darned if I can figure out what it is. I mean, visually, it looks like I've taken everything out that secures it. But physically, it still feels like it's being secured by something. Just can't see it. Oh, you know what it could be? This piece here, oh, well, you guys can see this, connects to the top of our power supply, and then the power supply secures to the bottom of the case. And that's tying the motherboard tray to the power supply. So I think I can either remove this one screw right here and take the power supply out with the tray, or take these two screws out, leave the power supply in, and slide the tray without it. That's what it looks like our hang-up is. Now, by leaving the power supply on it, we only take out one screw. It's easy to get to, but it adds a lot of weight to the weight of the board and the radiator and the power supply. But just removing that one screw right there and taking this piece off, I'm assuming that piece comes off. Otherwise, why is there a screw there? Come on, Carey. See now. Oh, we're close. I do believe that screw I just took out I should put back in. Leave the power supply in. You know what? We can do that later. Let's take out the two up here that I didn't want to take out because they're a lot harder to see. These are the short screws again, just like the shorter thumb screws that were at the bottom of the motherboard tray. Mostly documenting this for myself so I know how to put it back together. I cannot see a thing. It's out. It just got sideways on me. Now I think the tray will slide out. Yeah, that's much better. And that's about as far as I needed it. Now I can get to the other screws, I think, here on the side of the radiator. There's one. I'm trying to keep the screws together. At least if I don't know where they go, the number of them can identify, like we know there's 12 screws that are going to hold the back of the radiator on that'll all be the same ones. And that takes a little of the mystery out of what these screws go to. Just count how many you've got. The thumb screws are a little trickier because so much of this case uses thumb screws. Some are shallow, some are long. And as I mentioned, You can often put a longer one in where only a shorter one is needed, but the shorter ones likely won't reach to where the rest of the case you're assembling needs the longer ones. And then you got to figure out, where did I put them? So with that being done, did I get all the screws out of the back? I just have one screw left at the radiator, and I want to be very careful taking that out. Some cables in the way. There's one down here in the opposite corner. Save these two for last. So we'll start at the bottom one, again working with gravity instead of against it, so the whole thing doesn't fall out. It just swung off to the side, which is okay. Now here's the trick. This is the tricky part. What we want to do at this point is I want to re-secure the motherboard tray. I've taken out what I need to. Well, no, I can't re-secure the motherboard tray because then I can't get to that last screw. All right, so the tricky part is I need to remove that screw, and the radiator is going to come free, and we're going to set the radiator gently down. Then we'll take that last remaining screw from the motherboard, and then we can grab the motherboard and radiator and set them aside. I don't know where I'm going to put them yet. I suppose I should be thinking of that now and maybe move all of this to my left, your right, and yeah. And then we can repurpose this board, wipe the drive out. If there's a D drive, an E drive, any other NVMEs, we'll just leave one NVMe in there. Do a wipe and a reinstall, clean install of Windows 11. The activation stays tied to the motherboard, so I don't have to pay to reactivate it. And whether or not I want to keep all 4 sticks of RAM and remove 2 of them, depends on what kind of resale value this has. I'm not to just give it away. This was very expensive compared to a regular machine 4 years ago when it was built. This was one of the most expensive chips, motherboards, and RAMs. Well, not motherboards, but the RAM and the CPU were very, very expensive. And they still have more value today than, say, something that would have cost less 4 years ago. But it also means you're not going to necessarily add that much more value to it by including another used NVMe or 2 more used sticks of RAM. You're practically giving it away. Like the price it could sell for used with 1 NVMe and 2 sticks of RAM is probably not that much cheaper than if you included the 4 sticks of RAM and 2 or 3 NVMEs. People often don't see value in that. They'll pay to add it, but to buy it all as one unit, they're usually looking for the best price, which means we need to strip it down, and we then have extra NVMe and RAM we can use in other projects that still are DDR4 and perhaps those are probably Gen 3 on a 10th gen, I bet. So anyway, this is the tricky part, and that's why I strategically left certain screws, 2 screws, one up here in the corner, one here in the middle. Again, if we're working with the case flat, none of this matters, except how would we get to the other side of the radiator, right? So sometimes you don't have a choice, although a lot of times radiators are mounted at the top, in which case laying it flat, you'd be working sideways. You don't have to worry about it falling forward, but that would then crash into the motherboard if you weren't controlling that, once you've released it from being secured to the case. These aren't problems you have with an air cooler, and depending on how you've mounted it in the case and how easy the case is that you're working on, something like a dismantling of this compared to a 200R, I could have dismantled a 200R 10 times in the same amount of time it's taken me to do this. This also costs 4 times more money at least than a 200R build would, because you wouldn't have any of the RGB, you won't have the liquid cooler, and you won't have all the complexity of the cabling. So one goes hand in hand with the other is all I'm saying. I suppose what I need to do is just reach my hand in here. We'll take that last screw out. And that's going to release the radiator. But the radiator is still permanently affixed to the CPU with those hoses. And so we don't want to damage the hoses or kink them. And hopefully, they're only 4 years old. They shouldn't be very brittle or sensitive. There we go. Just got that last screw out. And all I want to do right now is just sort of gently guide this out. That's fine. It's not going anywhere. Now when I take the last screw out from the center of the motherboard, we'll put that screw with the rest of the radiator screws. When I take that last screw out from the center, again, I didn't want to hold it in from the corners. I didn't want to hold it in from the bottom. We don't want gravity to take it down and crack the board in half. And you'll notice anytime I'm struggling, I'm still not using brute force. I'm trying to figure out there's got to be a screw or a clip or something I'm missing. If you're in a hurry doing this, you will likely break something. And when you have a case like this, likely getting used parts is not possible. So you may end up having to go without whatever that clip held in, or buy a brand new case for the cost of a 5-cent clip. I don't know. All right, our final screw right here. There we go. Now you can see gravity dropped that board down quite a bit. I'm going to grab these hoses. Well, I'm going to grab essentially the block, right? Because I don't have to worry about anti-static discharge on the block or anywhere on the radiator. And I want to figure out how to guide this out without damaging anything. And I'm realizing now I've got a zip tie. This is not a good time to find this out. That's holding me in. So right now the side of the board, the I/O shield, is resting. If I steer it right, we can let gravity maybe hold that board for us at an angle without putting any bending on the board itself. The board can be bent a bit, they flex, but ideally we just don't want to flex it at all. And then I can get my wire cutters and see where the cable ties are that are holding us back. And remember, when I release the cable tie, that's probably going to release the radiator. And when the radiator falls down, it'll take the board with it. So maybe just hold on. We can hold on to the radiator with one hand, and then the board should stay seated. I see the cable tie that's causing my grief right there. And oh boy, yeah, this is a little bit more involved. Let's see how far we get now. Let me gently let that go. Grab my cable cutters, my wire cutters rather, and my cut off cable tie, and let's see if it'll let us. We're still really hung up on there. So you can see how much play we get from the hoses. We can just gently set the board down, and that eases some of my stress. And now I can more confidently look at where these cables are running because they're connecting to the fans. So I could take the fans off, but one way or another, we're not reusing the fans except with that radiator. So one way or another, this cable management's coming out. And I just don't want to remove more than I have to. But like I said, it might be me working harder than I need to work. Maybe not. Let's see what happens here. This is a good sign. This is a good sign. These are the 3 fan cables that go to the radiator into the fan controller. The fan controller will have to come off, but I don't need to do that right now. I think that clears me. That really wasn't bad. It was one cable tie and then unplugging the 3 fans from the back of the fan controller. That keeps it all together. And we'll also be able to clean it a lot better. There's nothing wrong with this radiator. And since it pairs so well with this motherboard, why change it? Why not just put it into a cheaper case that we can put a 360mm radiator in and still keep this a nice high-end system? You know, it's still very viable today. Now the motherboard tray does have some dust on it and stuff that exists behind the radiator, which, you know, we can get a microfiber towel and just wipe it down, all of it, just because we're already in it anyway. The one fan controller has to come off. It stays with the radiator. But whatever we end up putting back into this, that fan controller goes back in with this. But this will be a lot less work putting it back into a new system, as long as we're not dealing with a fancy case like this. In the meantime, we can reaffix the motherboard tray, maybe, I can put all the screws in a Ziploc bag or something, and then we decide what motherboard we want to put in here. I think I already have the cooler picked out. I was thinking the Trix 360, but I might change my mind on that. That's a $350 cooler. And for a case like this, you know, putting an Ultra 9 in it or a Ryzen 9 in it would be ideal. Sort of like if you have a Ferrari, you wouldn't want a 4-cylinder engine in there. We're still going to reuse all the same power supply, all the same screws we've taken out. I'll probably leave a video card out of it, or maybe I put that video card back into the new motherboard, keep it away from this one, because again, resale value on this, I'm going to lose my shirt. So I can at least limit my losses to the stuff I know I won't need again. I know I won't need the board again. I won't need this cooler again because the bracket system is for this socket type, which, you know, for the cost of a cooler, just buy a new one with the new mounting types for a new board. Keep it all as original as possible. We don't have to worry about things going wrong. I don't have to redo any thermal compound. Whether or not I take 2 sticks of RAM out, I don't know. As far as NVMe drives, if we look in here, let's see, I don't remember what we put in here. I think we did put 2 drives in here though. Yeah, so there's a 970 Evo Plus, probably a 2 terabyte Samsung. These were fast Gen 3, and they were a good price back in the day. And there's nothing wrong with it, but we'll clean it before we reuse it. And just to keep me from losing parts and losing my mind, I'm just going to put the heatsink back like so. Oh, I got to put the little screw back first because I don't want to lose that little screw. So we'll put that back. Slide this back in here. Close that up for now. Again, it might be in my best interest to keep that 970 Pro and put like a 1 terabyte drive in there. When people, and this is just the way society has become, they want to nickel and dime you to death. I already foresee that when I put this up for sale. So why give them 2 terabytes? Why give them 4 sticks of RAM when they're trying to get everything for as cheap as they can get it? Why sell it? So if I can sell this just the same for a $5 or $10 difference in price by simply leaving the extra stuff off of it, that leaves me extra stuff I can use in the future. But obviously they need a drive in there. I could sell it with a 512. It just depends on what somebody's willing to pay. And if they're, and I already know they're going to want the cheapest possible price, and I'm going to lose money on it. So how do I reduce how much I lose is don't include everything I don't have to. So if there's anything extra, a second drive is extra, 2 terabytes is extra, 4 sticks of RAM is 2 extra. They're not paying extra. It's pretty rare. So what I'll do is I'm going to clean these drives, and then I'll decide if I'm going to put one of these back in or do something cheaper. I'll put some feelers out, especially to the guy that likes to buy my used stuff, see if he has any interest in it. He likes flashy stuff. That's what his customers want, but it's also got to be cheap. This may still be too expensive for him. Even if I took all 4 sticks of RAM out and stuck some cheap RGB stuff in there, just having the cooler, that chip, and that motherboard alone is probably $400. And that there's probably his budget for the power supply, the case, the RGB, the fans, all of it. So at $400, it's not worth selling. And this is why I end up with so much stuff. For me to figure out how I can, you know, obviously if I put an air cooler on here, that would reduce the value of it and make the installation easier. So $400 seems more reasonable. I still end up with a cooler I don't necessarily need. So it's tough. It's really tough in the market. Now, if we have a use for it in the studio, it's a very capable machine. We just have to figure out what we would use it for. Or if we have somebody locally that wants to buy it, that's a different story with regards to somebody looking for a value that's, you know, going to pick it up. This is going to be something that you know, at least has 6 more years left in it, minimum, and was top of the line when it was built 4 years ago. If it was budget 4 years ago, this would be a different resale story. But we're talking about reselling a Ferrari. We're talking about reselling some high performance, lower quantity item. And a lot of used buyers don't see that. The used buyers are just looking at a number, and it doesn't matter if it's an i5 or an i7 or an i9. They have so much money they're willing to spend, or that they have to spend, and they want as much as they can get, but they can't budge from how much money they have. That's just what they've got. If it's a friend I'm helping, if it's somebody I know, that's different. If it's just some stranger on Facebook Marketplace, for all I know, they're making up the whole story so they can turn around and flip it for a $200 or $300 profit more than what they paid. And then I just got used. Again, selling used with computer stuff is very discouraging. But we'll figure it out. One way or another, my main focus isn't on this. My main focus is on rebuilding this and making it all modern and viable again as a machine that Maura would want to use again. Not that there's anything wrong with the Z got now, but the case itself isn't something that I'd want to part with. To me, it's like a part of the channel. Like the original Threadripper build is still at Studio A. We have certain sort of historic builds on this channel that are possible by the community, and I intend to hold on to them because they have an emotional value. But if I let it just get old and unused, it's like, what's the point? The case is still viable. Let's clean it up. Let's put something more modern in here, and let's see how long we can keep reusing it. It's a great example of the benefit of building your own computer as well, by setting the very example that I talk about. All right, and my hands are completely dusty. But that's 4 years of dust. So we do live in a desert, you know. What did you think was going to happen? We take another look here at the chat, and then we'll wrap it up for today. We're just a little over 2 hours, aren't we? Troll McTrollington with $3.50 Canadian in Super Chat said it's only LED. What's the worst that can happen? I guess the LEDs don't light up, making it the whole thing pointless. William Detton says hello. Rich Robbins joins us. Rich was in a video a few years back at Studio A. Good to see Rich. El Perez joining us. Bruce Key said the case is insane. It absolutely is insane. And it looks insane when it's all put together and the cable management is hidden as well as I can hide it. You know, Mara, came out during today's video just to express how much she still loves that case. It's the motherboard and the power that it has that's not impressing her anymore. And she definitely wants this back, but she wants it back better than it's ever been. And I'm just not quite sure what we're going to put in there. If there's something we have that we can put in there, or if we're going to have to buy something, I don't know yet. We don't have the budget to buy anything for it yet, but she also doesn't need it right now. So the main thing was just getting it apart. And in the meantime, if I can sell these parts and use that to help pay for the other parts, we'll do that. Otherwise, it'll just happen when it happens. But at least it's going to be prepped. It'll be cleaned and dust will get out of it, and I'll put the screws back in the tray there, and probably take all these screws, put them all in a Ziploc. At least I have them. Figuring out where they go is easy. Not having them or not finding them, oof, that's a whole different problem. The 10 gig card and the video card I'll put on the part shelf for now. I haven't decided what we're doing with this yet, but there's always a future build we use them. It doesn't make any sense to sell graphics cards today. There's no money in them. They often break, and I don't want to deal with the support issues. So I encourage people that want to buy a graphics card at a deal, go find a deal. I don't want to be the deal maker on that, because we still need graphics cards here anyway. For certain builds, we have to have them. Or for certain diagnostics, I need to have them. And I don't have an abundance of them. So the few I have, just so you know, the plan is to keep it on a shelf. And maybe, just maybe, it will go back in to the new board we put in here. But that's yet to be determined, because we haven't even figured out what board or chip we're putting in. This could be an AMD system before we're done. I don't know yet. We're certainly open to your suggestions if you want to leave your thoughts in the comments. Maybe someone's got a great idea out there. Delman 2000 says seeing all these parts on the table makes him tired. Well, that's why I love what I do, though. This isn't work for me. This is challenging, but not frustrating. I enjoy figuring out how to take it apart. I know I built it. I know if I built it, I can take it apart. I just can't remember. That's the hard part. Mortant said, I'm really liking that case, plus it's signed by Carey. Yeah, I did. Mara wanted me to sign it, and it's got the date of January of 21, I think, on it. In fact, the original build video, we have a link for that in the video notes. And this is the YouTube page. Whoops. Yeah, right here. You'll see the date. It says it's got only 11,000 views. So that probably made me $150 on this $3,000 build. That's YouTube, right? I mean, that's just the way it works. So 11,000 views is pathetic. 4 years ago. I should have a date on there somewhere. Yeah, streamed live on January 23rd of 2021. Now this is the final overview. This isn't the build, and you can see I've got the Wi-Fi antenna on it there. Yeah, these are final shots. So this is what it looked like once it was completed and dust-free. Turn the lights out, is that what I did? Yeah, that's the mini version of it that I have sitting over here by the corner of my desk. Anyway, if you guys missed it, that's an hour long for me to just go over it versus however many videos it was for me prepping the board and getting it into the case. And then the cable management I did off camera. And, you know, Mara just loved all that RGB, which I'm standing in front of. Come on, Carey, get out of the way. This way. Before I step in front of it. There we go. Plus, we got the RGB fans up in the front, too. And a little RGB on the motherboard. They're on the water block, on the RAM, and then the fans itself. Yep, so that link is in the video notes if you guys want to watch it later. And I think in these notes should be links to the build. There's our parts list. Yeah, maybe not. Might have to find all the pieces and put them together in one big video. Okay, let me get back over to camera one and let's wrap it up for today. Just some final looking here in the chat. Hey, Rick Lakes with a $5 super chat. Thank you, Rick. Hold on, that's not today's video. That's back 4 years ago. Well, 4 years later, thanks again. Where was I? I'm in the. So that's a problem. Pulling up my old videos, I see a chat going on, but that's a chat replay. So even I get confused if my videos are live or not. It's not just you. All right. Mark Gaines says, "What's going back in the case?" Yeah, we don't know yet. Something nice though. Some flagship. I haven't decided. You know, we do have that MSI Meg Ace, which was a $600 motherboard, but it's a 14900K, which is still a great processor. The problem is the motherboard is a little bit big for the case we put it in, that Cougar case. And I think that board should come out of the Cougar case. It'll fit much better as an EATX board in this case. But it's also not the latest and greatest, far from it. I mean, that's at least 2 years old. On the other hand, I can't think of a better case to put that size board into. And then that'll free up the Cougar case, which we can then maybe put one of the Ultra 7s in. That's what I'm thinking. I got to play a little musical chairs with the motherboards to figure out what fits well and what looks right. Got to be the right color. It's got to fit. And what ended up happening with the Cougar case that we were originally building for Mara is by the time we started adding everything she wanted, we ran out of room. So even though the case is big, it's not laid out very well in that regard. If we keep it with a regular ATX board and we don't go over the top with RGB, less is more, and it'll look a lot better and be a lot more manageable to build and you know, get in there and do cable management. Because at the end of the day, this is still a bigger case and it has much more room for a motherboard that's extended ATX is what we put in. So I'm thinking take the board out of that, put it in here. My only hesitation is that board is already 2 years old. It's still a great board. It's just not the latest and greatest. So if you think about it's been 4 years since we built this, then for me to go through all this work, we're going to be at 4 years again in 2 years' time because it's already 2 years old. The board and the CPU are, not the case. The case, that Cougar case, is not even a year old. It's like 6 months old. And that's the dilemma. It's like, it's still a great board. And we go from a 10900K to a 14900K. That's still a 4-generation jump, which is 40% increase average in performance. But AMD's got the new Ryzen 9 9000 series X3D chips coming out. And maybe that'll be a better fit. I don't know. Intel doesn't have anything coming out for a while. It'll be fall. I'd like to do this before the summer. So we'll see how it all plays out. Hey, there's Marvin Jameson. Speaking of upgrades, hey Marvin, you know it's February. We were talking about upgrading your Corsair 200R we built for you, right? Marvin's a 3-time Purple Heart recipient, and he loves gaming. And he had bought a system from a company called Lyte, L-Y-T-E. Boy, did they take him to the cleaners. So we got that right for him. And now it's been a few years. Has it been 4 years? I think Marvin's due for an upgrade. And I intend to do that for free for Marvin. I don't expect this to cost Marvin a penny. Between our community and Marvin's sacrifice to our country, be happy to do it for him. Not that he's asked. He's not asking. I just think, hey, let's upgrade. It's good content for us. It's a great upgrade for him. And it's a great way to show our community support. What do you guys think? More importantly, what do you think, Marvin? I say we keep your same video card, though. That's the expensive part. Leave his video card in, but we can change his motherboard, his processor, his RAM, get him something more current. I don't even remember what he's got, but it's been a few years. Nobody ever says my gaming computer is too powerful. And Marvin has no complaints with what he's got. Just kind of figure it's time, and we do it. Andy Kane says, definitely upgrade for Marv. I don't know if I will. I feel like I should call him sir. How many cores and threads does this board have? Well, it's a 10900K, right? So if you just go to Google and, because I don't know, 10900K, that had 10 cores that were hyper-threaded, so 10 cores, 20 threads. It was released in April of 2020. Is when we didn't buy it in April of 2020, but it was released in April of 2020. And we bought it sometime around, I want to say August of 2020. And then we finished the build and got it delivered. Well, we know that was in January of 21. So I'm not exactly sure. This was not an overnight build. This was not a 1 week build. I think I saved this for Fridays. And there's probably 3 or 4 Fridays involved, maybe 5 Fridays involved in this build. Yeah, it's no slouch. You know, even by today's standards. Yeah, Patrick Manny says, yeah, 1020. That's right. Patrick's got it right. Marvin says, sorry, I've been under the weather for the last few months. Months? That's not acceptable, Marvin. Get better now. Come on. I'm sorry to hear that. I do hope you'll feel better soon. I understand people not feeling better for a few weeks. I hope that's nothing serious. Marvin's a fighter. James Steinbreaker says PVS question. PVS? I don't know what that stands for. Is that the place where you get prescriptions filled? Rick Ash says, I think it's great. Mark Gaines says, yeah, give him an upgrade. Mortant says he agrees. He's former United States Air Force. Right on. I think that about wraps it up. The chat room's a little bit quiet today. Scott Loosemore says, what do you think of Fantex? Overall, I like Fantex. There's some cases I like more than others, and I'm not loyal to a particular brand. Every brand makes a case I don't like, at least one. And a few brands make cases I really like a lot. So we did the original, not the original, the upgraded streaming PC was a birthday build I did for myself. It was about $4,000 in a Fantex in-through case, which is a mid-tower micro ATX case. I'm looking right at it. It's sitting right over here. That's a 9900 KS processor, which was the best you could buy at the time for consumer use. A Z390 Gaming X, Z390M gaming motherboard from Gigabyte. It all still works great. And the case is in perfect condition. I just don't have any use for it. It's been put off to the side as more of a history piece and an emergency backup streamer. I have about 4 backup streamers though, 2 here and 2 over at Studio A. So if anything should happen, any disaster or unexpected activity, fires, floods, thefts, I can still stay in business. So when it comes to backups, I don't just back up my data. I have backup keyboards, backup power supplies, backup motherboards, backup streaming systems, backup cameras. Not literally, that's in the car. But I have extra cameras. So if a worst case scenario happens at one location or the other, I can put myself back online again and still keep moving. Because it's one thing to take the loss. It's another thing to not be able to work until you spend more money on investment to get the work so that you can work, to get the tools to work. So I have duplicates and duplicates. And I feel anybody that runs a business and, you know, they rely on that business to make their house payment, pay their electricity, plus the cost of running the business. If there's a rental there, electricity, employees, we need duplication so that we can minimize any downtime. It's not about the cost of the equipment, it's about the loss of productive income because you can't work. So depending on the size of the company, this can be massive losses every minute you're down. It could be thousands of dollars every 60 seconds your employees can't work, depending on the scale of the operation. And that's why a $1,000 computer off to the side or a $1,000 camera is nothing. You buy it once, it's not going to go stale, you know? And if we need it, it's just a matter of getting it plugged in and configured and updated, which is much faster than panic buying, you know, getting the acquisition of it. Because once you've got it, it's just hooking it up. So it's still stressful, but it's less stressful and it's less expensive for everybody. Scott says he's building an i5 14600KF mini ITX. Yeah, my nephew just built something, and I think he uses the DAN case. So really with mini ITX, it's all on the case. Some of those are very difficult, very confined, but they all look fantastic. Jim Kenny said, Carey, if I did this right, you just got an Amazon gift card. Well, let's check. I should check the phone before I say goodbye anyway. It's nothing like ending the video and then checking my phone and going, gosh darn, I missed an opportunity to say thank you to somebody who I didn't notice until later had contributed. Feel terrible when I do that. Yes, I have an Amazon gift card from Jim Kenny for $10. He says, keep up the great work. I hope you enjoy the Amazon gift card. Right on. You're the best. Thank you so much. Almost everything you see on this table was purchased through Amazon using your gift cards. So if you're wondering where does all this stuff come from, your memberships, your contributions, it's 100% paid for, plus my own contributions, of course. And so the more we have from contributions and support, the bigger and more elaborate the projects can be. And you know, I still have the problem of getting rid of some of the stuff, but the older stuff, I do have a buyer who wants the older stuff. It's the newer stuff I build that I'm stuck, because shipping it just doesn't make any sense anymore. Shipping has become outrageously expensive, and they've been pretty much damaging everything. And when I say they, I mean every shipper. Doesn't matter who I use, things are just arriving damaged. And then the buyers, they're not really saving any money, because by the time you figure in the cost of shipping, you might as well have just bought it brand new from Amazon because they get free shipping. I don't. And shipping something like this would probably cost about $300. And it probably won't arrive in one piece. So that's why I've limited the sales to the Phoenix area. Also, I can support better. If somebody has a computer problem, they're not that far away. Not all problems can be fixed remotely. And if you have a bad power supply or a loose wire, that's a lot of money to send it back to me. Doesn't leave for a lot of repeat customers, let me tell you. So I'm not built for that, for shipping, but I do appreciate people's enthusiasm for wanting to build. But I never created the channel to sell computers. I created the channel to showcase and introduce new parts, build techniques, and to encourage people to do it themselves, to build whatever you want. Pick the motherboard you want, processor, the RAM, the storage. Let me show you how easy it all goes together, regardless of your choices. And the goal was to inspire people to do it themselves. I never really thought about people wanting to buy what I was building, and we kind of explored that a bit, and now that's done. So in any event, if you are in the Phoenix area, if you're interested, reach out to my email. Our email address is available to anybody to use at any time, and that is right here on the screen, showcasecreate@gmail.com. This way. You'd think by now I'd get used to doing everything backwards, wouldn't you? Not on purpose. I just do it backwards because that's just how I do it. But if you have anything of private matters to concern, and that would be anything involving business, let's talk about business in email, not in the chat room. If you're having technical difficulties, you can email us. However, the amount of time that we have to spend with you, depending on if you're a member of the channel or not, it could be fee-based, or you can go to our forum. And the forum, if I can bring up my YouTube, my screen capture, I'll just take you there right now. The forum is completely free. It's always available 24/7. We have no intention to monetize. We just go over here and we'll type in CareyHolzman.boards.net, and this link is in the video description below the video. And again, it is free to register. We don't really need anything other than for you to register a name and an email address. We don't need any credit card information. There's no billing. Under general discussion, you'll see many of our familiar names in the chat room here joining us on the forum. We'd love for you to join us at your leisure here. And especially if you have technical problems, this enables other members of the community to assist you instead of putting all that pressure on us. However, if we can help you, we're certainly happy to help. And so we're just giving you ways as a community to connect with one another as well as to us that aren't discouraging, right? It's as simple as a click and you're there. Registration's fee-free, and we never intend on charging a fee for this, right? If you need personal tech support for our members, no problem. If you're not a member, please consider becoming one if for no other reason than to help support this channel. I want you guys to be the sponsors versus being beholden to some big soulless corporation. And if I can do that, well, I can't do it without you. Or the scale to which I can do it depends on whether or not you support us. But for the people that support us, I do offer them free support. And for the people that aren't supporting us, well, we can, handle you like any other customer unless it's something really easy. But given that, it is what I do for a living. I do get paid to do that. So anyway, that's kind of how I'm working this out. It may not get me rich, but I can sleep really well at night. Thanks again to Mara, of course, for all the work she does in the background. Our friends at SCD Keys with those discounted Windows and Microsoft Office license keys, fully legal, legitimate, and severely discounted compared to what Microsoft wants. If you guys have any trouble buying or activating a key, they will help you. They guarantee their keys. On the other hand, if they're not helping you for some reason, reach out to me personally. I'll make sure it gets taken care of, even if it means refunding you with my own money. That's how convinced and how confident I am in the quality, the support, the legality, and the price of what they're doing. That's why it's them and nobody else. I didn't just randomly pick them, and they didn't pick me. It took a while to research who they were and where these keys are coming from, and that they're legal. So everything passes my muster for running my business, which I'm not going to jeopardize to make a few dollars. And whether or not you buy a key, I don't make money anyway. I'm just trying to make sure that you guys get legitimate keys that are supported rather than some questionable thing off of some sketchy website. And you have a 30% off discount code, Carey, so they're already like cheap. You get an additional 30%. It's cost me more to eat lunch at Wendy's than what a license key for Windows 10 Pro costs at SCD Keys. So just know they're available if you ever need a key. You don't need to spend all kinds of crazy money. You can if you want to, but I'm putting that out there for you. I hope you take advantage of it. Thanks, of course, to everybody who has contributed today. Of course, our friend Mark Gaines, and phone's in my pocket. I want to shout out one more time the gift cards. Jim Kenny, Mark Gaines, I said. Bill Bennett. And for the super chats, a shout out one more time, because again, without our members and without the super chats and the gift cards, the production of videos is going to slow way down, and it's going to be more of me talking and less of me doing. You think there's a lot of me talking and not doing now? Just imagine the same thing without anything on the counter. Anyway, what was I saying? Oh, for the super chats today, one more shout out again. Troll McTrollington. We got a couple super chats, three super chats from Troll McTrollington today. Right on. Thank you for that and for becoming a member here. FM Lazar. Wait, five super chats from Troll McTroll. No, hold on. 4 super chats and a membership from Troll McTrollington today. That's nice. Thank you so much. Welcome into the Tech Club. Again, FM Lazar as well as Samuel Kowalski. Samuel just renewed his membership. Now a member for 13 months. Mark Gaines not only sent the Amazon gift card, but also a 10-pound super chat. Thank you, Mark, as always. Our friend Peter in the Netherlands with €1. Peter has given a lot of €1 contributions, and they add up. And we certainly appreciate that thoughtfulness. And it all goes back into the channel. David Martinez with a $2 super chat. Right on. Thank you, David. Right under the wire. That'll wrap it up for me for today. I will see you all again very, very soon. Not sure if we're available tomorrow, but definitely on Friday. We always go live on Fridays at 1 o'clock Phoenix time. And on Mondays, we're always live for members only at 1 o'clock Phoenix time. Those are definite set in stone. The rest of the week is kind of what my schedule permits. And if you subscribe to the channel, make sure you turn notifications on so you'll be alerted any other time we schedule for a live video. Thank you so much for joining us, especially to our members and for everyone in the chat today for your interaction, your questions. We love having you here. We look forward to seeing you all very, very soon. Until next time, bye for now.